I don't understand how I dedicated 22 years of my life to my fans, and now they turn on me. I go on my Twitter and I see people saying, you look like you have AIDS, you should go die.
The cause of death of Aaron Carter has been determined. LA County coroner says that the singer died from drowning.
Breaking news tonight from Lancaster, California. Pop star Aaron Carter has been found dead at his home. The 34-year-old singer was discovered unresponsive in his bathtub. The world watches in silence as flashing blue lights paint the suburban street in shades of sorrow. The same boy who once filled stadiums with laughter now lies beneath a white sheet, another bright name fading from the golden walls of Hollywood. Cameras zoom in. Reporters whisper. The same old lines echo through every screen. Gone too soon. Mysterious circumstances. Found alone. But behind the headlines, behind the carefully worded police reports, hides a truth that fame never lets rest easy. What really happened to Aaron Carter?
He had struggled with domestic troubles, drug addiction, and mental health issues for years. He was 34.
Before the headlines turned him into a cautionary tale, Aaron Charles Carter was the glittering image of late 90s pop perfection.
Do you regret ever getting involved in...
I didn't have a choice. It got bad when I was about 15 years old because when I did MTV Cribs, the day that I had to go show off that house, my mom and my dad told me, we're getting a divorce, but you still have to go do this. I had to go show off all the stuff my whole life that was going to be taken away from me.
Born in Tampa, Florida, December 7th, 1987, he was the kid who stole the mic before he could spell fame. At just 9 years old, his smile sold innocence. His voice sold millions. He was Nick Carter's little brother. The golden sibling in the backstreet shadow, yet somehow brighter, wilder, louder. His debut album dropped in 1997. And suddenly, Aaron wasn't just Nick's brother, he was a teen sensation. Aaron's Party, Come Get It, blared from MTV screens, and a generation of teenage hearts found their next idol. In candy-colored music videos, he danced like life was a never-ending summer. But behind those pastel sets and bright smiles, the factory of fame was already spinning fast, loud. By the early 2000s, he'd shared stages with Britney Spears, toured the world, and made headlines for being too charming to ignore. He had the money, the fans, the chaos, everything except peace. The industry that built him was hungry, and Aaron was too young to understand what it meant to be consumed. As his voice changed and fame shifted to newer faces, the applause began to fade. He was still performing, still chasing the sound of those screaming crowds, but the echo grew quieter each year. He was no longer the boy with a microphone. He was a man fighting to keep the world listening. Years later, interviews caught a different Aaron, not the cheerful sugar rush pop star, but a restless, sharp-eyed man speaking about betrayal, money, and fame's cruelty. He said he'd been used, lied to, abandoned. He said he wanted to tell his side of the story. Sometimes he'd break down on live streams, talking to thousands of fans who watched like it was reality TV, but to Aaron, it was therapy. Other times he'd lash out at the media, his family, the very system that had once made him rich. He was alone and he knew it. Hollywood had already moved on, but if you look closely behind those trembling hands, behind those tired eyes, you could still see the boy who once believed the world was his. A boy now trapped in a maze built from memories, microphones, and medicine bottles. The crowd that once lifted him up was gone, but the noise never stopped. Because of Aaron Carter. The lights never really go out in Hollywood. Even when your show ends, someone, somewhere, still replays your best moment, and sometimes your worst. For Aaron Carter, that replay button became a curse. By his mid-20s, the headlines had changed their flavor. No longer teen idol or pop prince. Now, they whispered, troubled, unstable, addicted. The cameras that once adored him now hunted him lenses, zooming in, not on his smile, but on his stumbles. It started small. A shaky performance here, a strange post there. He'd talk about fame, betrayal, and lawsuits names, amounts, and broken trusts. His family was in chaos. The Carters had fame, but not peace.
Childhood star, always being in the spotlight, but today, right now, I just want to talk man-to-man with you.
Let's do it.
You're 29.
Nick, the backstreet superstar, was distant. Aaron, the younger brother, was spiraling, feeling forgotten by both the industry and his own blood. In interviews, he'd call himself the original child star turned survivor. But survival had a cost. He began losing control of money, of image, of mind. He'd appear live on Instagram, eyes half tired, voice trembling, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying. One moment he'd talk about making a comeback, the next he'd accuse people of trying to destroy him.
I go on my Twitter and I see people saying, "You look like you have AIDS, you should go die."
The same fans who once danced to his songs now watched his breakdowns in real time, leaving emojis where empathy should have been. He tried to fight back with music. In 2018, he dropped Love, his attempt to reclaim his name, his narrative. It was raw, full of pain and pleading. But the world had changed. TikTok ruled, trends replaced talent, and nostalgia wasn't enough. His sound didn't fit anymore. His story was all anyone cared about. He'd post cryptic tweets, "You think you know me? You don't!" He'd call out his brother, his ex-fiancés, his haters. Every message sounded like a cry written between sleepless nights. Then came the face tattoo symbols, angels, heartbreaks inked across his skin. Each line told a silent story, pain masked as rebellion. He said it was about art, about control. But his fans saw something else. A boy trying to carve permanence into a world that kept erasing him. Drugs entered the frame again, prescription meds, anxiety pills, and whispers of harder things. He claimed he was sober. Sometimes he was, sometimes not. The interviews grew messier, the rooms dimmer, the eyes emptier. In one live stream, he smiled weakly and said, "People say I'm crazy."
Absolutely no, and that's a fact. I haven't always been safe sexually, and I have no qualms in saying that. There's nothing wrong with me saying that.
"I just think I've been hurt too much." The comment section filled with hearts of digital sympathy that meant nothing when the camera turned off. By 2021, Aaron lived like a ghost in his own fame. He'd sit in his studio surrounded by gold records, talking to fans who didn't know how to help him. He'd hold his infant son on live streams, saying he wanted to be a better father than the world allowed him to be. But the walls were closing in custody battles, online hate, police visits, canceled shows. His name became a trend again, not for his music, but for his madness. He kept saying, "I'm fine. Don't believe what you read." But his voice betrayed him, shaking, uncertain. Tired, the kid who once danced on Nickelodeon stages now sat alone, trapped between two worlds, the one he built with fame, and the one fame left him in. And somewhere between those echoes, Aaron Carter began to disappear. By the time the year turned to 2022, Aaron Carter's life had shrunk to the quiet hum of a California house that didn't feel like home. The blinds were always half closed, the lights always too bright for his tired eyes. He'd drift from room to room, half dad, half artist, half memory. His fans still watched. Every post, every live stream, every stumble. And Aaron, needing to be seen, kept turning on the camera to the one friend that never left him. But the screen's glow wasn't love anymore. It was surveillance. He spoke faster, ranted longer, smiled less. Sometimes the music equipment behind him stayed unplugged on a stage with no sound. In interviews, he sounded defiant. "They want me gone," he'd say. "But I'm not going anywhere." The words felt like armor, but the cracks were visible. He complained of people following him, tapping his phone, trying to destroy his image. To his fans, it sounded like paranoia. To those who knew fame's dark corners, it sounded like fear. He'd talk about new music, new love, new peace. But his eyes told a different story. Glassy, restless, searching. He was recording songs about redemption while fighting for custody of his son. The court hearings, the online feuds, the tabloids all piling up like unpaid bills in his mind. There were glimpses of hope, too. He'd share pictures of his baby, smiling like the world still had color. But it was temporary, like sunlight slipping through storm clouds. The next day would bring another fight, another post, another confession. Neighbors sometimes heard late-night arguments, sometimes silence so heavy it felt wrong. Packages stacked outside his door, fan letters, studio gear, things he'd ordered but never used. He was planning new projects, collaborations, a comeback tour, all promises scribbled on notes that no one would ever see again. Then came the day he posted a photo of himself in the studio. Captioned simply, "See you soon." Fans cheered, but some said his smile didn't reach his eyes. On the morning of November 5th, 2022, the silence in Lancaster felt thicker than usual. A housekeeper knocked, called his name, then opened the door to a bathroom filled with steam and stillness. The bathtub was full. Aaron was inside, unresponsive, surrounded by the quiet chaos of a life half-lived. Police reports would later say, no foul play, just another lonely night gone wrong. But to those who watched him fall apart online, it didn't feel that simple. How does a man go from screaming to the world for help? To die unheard behind a locked door? Within hours, the news spread clips, hashtags, headlines. The same networks that once ignored him now ran tributes and timelines. His name trended again, one last performance, played on every screen. Fans flooded his old videos with messages. We failed you. You deserved better. Rest easy. Pop Prince. But the silence that followed was deafening. Because deep down, everyone knew Aaron Carter didn't just die that morning. He'd been dying in pieces, live stream by live stream, for years. The news vans were gone within days. The police tape came down, and the house on Valley Vista Drive went quiet again. Just another California home with secrets sealed in tiles and air. Inside, faint marks of his last days remained. A studio chair pushed slightly back. Unfinished lyrics on a notepad, a microphone that still smelled of cigarettes and loneliness. There was a half-filled mug of coffee on the counter. The world had already moved to the next story. But the echo of Aaron Carter lingered not just in the walls, but in the way his name returned like a ghost whenever fame was mentioned with pain. In the weeks that followed, every outlet turned detective fans, dissected live streams, slowed down his words, and froze frames looking for clues. Some said he was getting better, that someone wanted him silenced. Others said it was just another overdose, a tragic end to a chaotic life. But the truth remained blurred like a photo taken through fog. Toxicology reports confirmed traces of prescription medication and inhalant abuse, a deadly mix of calm and collapse. Officially, it was an accidental drowning. Unofficially, it was everything fame does to those who try to outlive it. Nick Carter cried on stage the next week, tears streaming as fans held up posters of two brothers who never found their way back to each other. The Backstreet Boys performed Incomplete, and for the first time, the lyrics sounded like confession. I tried to go on like I never knew you. The line cut deeper than anyone expected. Meanwhile, old interviews resurfaced, Aaron laughing, Aaron crying, Aaron trying to be heard. In one, he said, "If I die young, at least they'll finally listen." Now they did, but too late. Months later, fans started leaving notes outside his old home. You were loved. You mattered. Plastic flowers faded under the California sun, but someone always replaced them. It was as if the world was trying to apologize, but apologies mean little to ghosts. For Hollywood, he became another cautionary name, a story about the machine that turns children into products, then leaves them behind when the shelf space runs out. For fans, he remained a mirror of innocence, devoured by attention, of love confused with likes. And yet, there's something hauntingly poetic about Aaron's legacy. He began as the boy everyone adored, and ended as the man everyone watched, but no one truly saw. His story became a timeline of how fame evolves from applause to obsession, from admiration to addiction. Somewhere online, his music still plays "I Want Candy" sooner or later, fragments of a life caught between glitter and grief. Each replay feels less like nostalgia and more like a whisper. This is what it costs. If you drive past his old neighborhood today, you won't find memorials or crowds. Just a quiet street and the faint hum of life moving on. But when the wind passes through those palm trees at night, it sounds almost like applause, soft, distant, broken. And maybe, just maybe, that's the universe giving Aaron one final encore. When the police sealed the report with the words "no foul play," the world was supposed to move on. But in Hollywood, nothing ever ends that neatly. Every tragedy here becomes a puzzle that refuses to stay solved. Fans began pulling at threads the moment Aaron's body was found. Why did neighbors hear loud arguments the night before? Why was the security camera turned off between 2 and 4 a.m.? Why did the autopsy take weeks to release when nothing suspicious was found? The more the media insisted it was simple, the more complicated it seemed. One YouTuber claimed to have screenshots of Aaron warning a friend that they were after him. Another found odd posts, deleted within minutes, about industry blackmail. Conspiracy channels erupted, looping grainy clips of his last live streams, zooming in on every flicker of fear in his eyes. Some pointed to the house itself. It had belonged to another musician years earlier who also struggled with addiction. Locals called it the Echo House, a place where every tenant seemed to spiral. Was it superstition or coincidence? Hollywood loves both. Then came the whispers about the prescriptions. Multiple bottles, overlapping medications, anti-anxiety pills, sleep aids, sedatives. The toxic mix that killed him wasn't uncommon, but the doses didn't make sense to some doctors reviewing the publicly released report. They asked who prescribed all this. The paperwork, mysteriously, was missing a signature page. Even his close friends disagreed on what really happened. One said he was improving, making music again, finally stable. Another said he was scared, convinced that someone was trying to break in. Both stories couldn't be true unless Aaron was living in the uneasy space between hope and hallucination. And then there was the bathtub. Those who knew him well said Aaron hated baths, preferred showers. So why was he found submerged? The internet took that question and ran with it, turning it into a million-view mystery overnight. Tabloids printed their own versions. Haunted by Fame, Hollywood's Cursed Prince, The Final Livestream, each headline sold a piece of him again, the same way the industry once did when he was alive. Only this time, Aaron couldn't protest. His fiancée, Melanie, posted a trembling video weeks later. I don't think this was an accident. I just know it. Her words broke something open. Suddenly, fans weren't just mourning, they were investigating. Red string theories filled Reddit boards. Every rumor became a clue, every silence an admission. Police called it internet hysteria. But even they couldn't explain the missing phone, never found in the house. It vanished the same day his iCloud activity stopped. To some, it was nothing. To others, it was everything. As weeks passed, the noise around Aaron's death grew louder than his music had in years. In trying to find the truth, people recreated the very storm that destroyed him. They wanted answers, closure, someone to blame. But Hollywood rarely gives answers, only stories that circle themselves until they sound like myth. And somewhere, beyond the hashtags and theories, Aaron Carter remained not as a headline, not as a ghost, but as a question the world still couldn't answer. In Hollywood, the light never shines without a shadow, and Aaron Carter had been standing in both for far too long. When he was barely 10, executives saw a product, not a person. A voice they could auto-tune, a smile they could sell. The money came fast, but so did the control. By 15, Aaron didn't own his own songs. By 20, he didn't own his own name, and when he tried to fight back lawyers, contracts, accountants, they reminded him who signed the checks. He wasn't an artist anymore. He was inventory. Those who worked with him described two Aarons. One polite, funny, still chasing his childhood fans' approval. The other was tired, paranoid, furious at an invisible system that kept pulling strings long after the stage lights went dark. He once told an interviewer, "You think you own yourself until someone tells you you don't." It was brushed off as another celebrity meltdown, but behind closed doors, it was a warning no one wanted to hear. When his brother Nick rose higher in fame, the media crafted a cruel narrative, the forgotten Carter, the troubled one. And the industry fed on that contrast, one brother selling out arenas, the other selling headlines. Every relapse became entertainment. Every tear became a meme. What the public didn't see were the meetings, the quiet settlements, the years of unpaid royalties. Aaron wasn't just broke, he was bleeding. He'd once been worth millions, but contracts and management fees left him counting coins. He filed for bankruptcy at 25, a former teen millionaire, now asking for a chance to start over. Then came the comeback. A label offered him a deal small but promising. He recorded late nights, posting snippets online, raw vocals, trembling hope. But each time a track gained traction, something happened. Copyright strikes, legal freezes, unexplained takedowns. He once tweeted, "They don't want me to release my truth." The tweet disappeared hours later. Those around him said Aaron believed someone was trying to silence him. His new songs were confessional blunt about drugs, fame, and manipulation. The label called them too risky. Aaron called them real. In one leaked voice note, he said, "I know too much. That's my biggest problem." A friend later claimed it was a joke. But in hindsight, nothing about Aaron's words felt like jokes anymore. He spoke of names and contracts signed in fear, said that the system eats its stars alive, then acts surprised when they're gone. For many, it sounded like a bitter ex-celebrity rant. But for others, it sounded like a confession or a warning. By 2022, Aaron wasn't just fighting addiction. He was fighting invisibility. The industry that built him had already replaced his music streaming under nostalgia playlists, his face forgotten behind newer, shinier ones. He tried one last push for a documentary idea titled The Price of Pop. It was supposed to expose what he called the machine. Filming had just begun. Then he was found in the bathtub. Hollywood moved on. But those who'd seen his early footage said it was chilling. One unfinished scene had Aaron staring straight into the camera saying, "You're watching me disappear in real time, and you'll clap for it." Maybe he knew. Maybe he'd already written his ending. The headlines cooled, but the commerce of sorrow warmed up. Within days of his death, streaming playlists renamed themselves in tribute. Documentary pitches flooded inboxes. Merch stores launched limited runs of nostalgia tees and posters. The market of memory had opened its doors and everyone was invited to buy. Producers who once ignored his calls now called with offers, "We can tell your story." Networks that fed on scandal promised context and healing. 1,000 content creators stitched together clips of his best smiles and worst interviews, layering them with piano and whispering narration. Aaron's image spun again and again, edited to comfort, to provoke, to click. In some corners, the retelling felt sincere, friends and collaborators giving interviews through tears. Reading from messages, recollecting laughter between the chaos. They spoke of a boy who loved performing with reckless joy, of a man who cradled his child like sunrise. Those testimonies softened the edges of tabloid, caricature, and returned a sliver of humanity to a life so often reduced to headlines. But for every heartfelt eulogy there was a counter, an opportunistic breakdown, a conspiracy livestream, a listicle about the most shocking moments. The nuance of Aaron's life was easy to ignore when sensationalism sold. Clips were looped, context cut out, and the same images that once fed his success now fed his afterlife. Freeze frames of a late-night rant, a shaky handshake, the ink of a fresh tattoo. They became icons, then memes, then museum pieces in the internet's gallery of brief attention. Legal teams circled too. Estates were considered. Royalties reappeared like buried coins. A charity fund was proposed to help child stars navigate finances and mental health. A sincere step, some said, while others suspected PR, sometimes good intentions. Arrive wrapped in press releases and press releases. Have always been comfortable with paradoxes. Documentaries arrived in two forms: the investigative and the indulgent. One series promised to get to the truth, interviewing ex-managers and lawyers and airing private snippets. Another stitched together hours of live streams and captioned them with ominous music. Less investigation, more theater. Both performed a strange service. They reminded people in different ways that a life cannot be wholly explained by grief or gossip. Still, each frame turned him into a subject again, a story for consumption. The internet, predictably, is divided. Some used his death to argue for better protections for young artists, calls for mental health support, for transparent contracts, for guardianship reforms. Petitions circulated, hashtags trended, and for a while conversation shifted from voyeurism to policy. There were panels, think pieces, and earnest interviews with therapists who explained how the machinery of fame fractures a fragile mind. It felt briefly like progress, like the possibility that his tragedy might seed change. Yet the other side of the coin remained. Click farms assembled timelines of his mistakes. Reaction channels monetized grief with dissecting commentary. They spun moral lessons from selective clips, preaching to audiences who had never known him beyond a thumbnail. When sadness is marketable, the market finds a way to package it. Within the family, healing was private and imperfect. Nick's public grief softened some criticisms, but it did not erase years of distance. Friends traded memories in half-formed interviews. Some relationships mended, some remained forever frayed. For those closest to Aaron, the aftermath was not cinematic, it was grocery lists, custody paperwork, and the small, stubborn rituals of absent presence. Birthday cakes bought for an absent father, messages saved and replayed on lonely nights. Fans kept vigil in smaller, quieter ways. On anniversaries, they uploaded covers of his songs, sometimes adding lines of apology into comments. They left flowers and notes near places he once performed. A fan-made mural appeared in a city park, a large, slightly weather-worn portrait with painted eyes that seemed to watch the horizon. People came to stand beneath it and talk to someone who couldn't answer back. In classrooms and clinics, his name became a shorthand for a broader lesson. Professors played his rise and fall the way they teach cautionary tales about ethics in media, about the exploitation of young talent. Counselors told stories of Aaron when advising families in the industry, using his life to illuminate warning signs they could no longer afford to miss. And the music kept playing. His songs lived on in playlists and algorithmic rotations, sometimes sandwiched between throwback bops and late-night ads. A teenage listener in 2025 might stumble on a chorus and feel a jolt of curiosity, pausing to wonder who the voice belonged to. In that way, he found a strange immortality, his recorded art continuing to hold space for new ears, new small awakenings, new quiet recognitions of vulnerability. Not every echo was sad. Some were tender, a charity fund that did reach artists, scholarship programs for at-risk youth that bore his name, a documentary that provided a platform for his survivors to speak candidly about addiction and grief. Those outcomes didn't erase the exploitation or the mistake, but they reshaped a portion of the aftermath into something useful, an attempt to turn headline into handhold. Yet the hardest truth lingered. Legacy is not the same as redemption. The world could replay his best moments, write think pieces or pass laws, but none of it could replay the unsaid apologies or unplayed records, or the single night when a man slipped away in a quiet house. Fame had given him an audience, and fame had ultimately failed to give him protection. On a late evening, long after the cameras left, a fan uploaded one last video, a simple montage of Aaron singing, intercut with clips of him playing with his child. The soundtrack soft, almost private. The video had no dramatic narration, no accusatory headlines, only a caption, "For the boy who loved the mic." It was watched by thousands, shared by tens of thousands, and in its modesty, it felt like the truest tribute of all. The industry would keep its patents. Markets would continue to trade in spectacle. People would continue to chase the thin light of attention. But sometimes, in the echo of a sung chorus or a mural on a wall, something would change. A new manager asking harder questions, a producer insisting on counseling, a label refusing to churn a child into a commodity. Aaron Carter's story did what many tragic stories do. It forced a mirror up to a culture that had always preferred clarity over complexity. In the end, the echoes he left were not tidy. They were messy and conflicted, full of profit and pity, sermons and sincerity. They reminded the world that fame can make a person feel seen and invisible at the same time. As the years softened the sharp edges of headlines, a quieter public memory remained, one that didn't demand an investigation or a conspiracy, only a pause. People would remember the music, the smile, and the boy who once believed the applause would last forever. And sometimes, on nights when the streetlights flickered just so, that memory sounded less like a headline and more like a soft, unfinished chorus.